Okay, I'm going to get started. So I think we have a good quorum. So I'm Carla Spagnoletti. I'm one of the Gen Med clinician educators. I'm an associate professor, and I am going to be talking with you today about how to build a professional reputation. This actually stemmed from a workshop that I did at SGIM last year, actually in the context of a fellow symposium. So really the only attendees at that symposium were first and second year Gen Med fellows who were thinking about career and about to embark on their faculty positions. And so it seemed like a really great time to talk about that. But Dr. McNeil and some others who knew that I did this thought that this would also be a great topic for this seminar series. I am gearing it mostly towards clinician educators, although I understand that there may be people in the audience that are not necessarily clinicians. I think probably everybody who would come to this talk is an educator, and so I think that there are a lot of things that have lots of parallels between clinician educator careers and then other types of academic education careers. So before I sort of launch into this, there's a couple of things. I gave you a handout. The handout is really an activity sheet that you're going to be using throughout the talk. So if you don't have one, there's piles in the back that you can grab one. The second thing is I'm interested in kind of getting a feel for what level, academic-wise, everybody in the audience is at. So if you are at the instructor level, raise your hand. That would be probably mostly fellows. Okay. If you're at the assistant professor level, raise your hand. And if you are at the associate professor level, raise your hand. And professor level, raise your hand. Okay, so we have a very broad audience, which is great. Now, for the professors in the room, I know that you care about your reputation. A lot of this is going to focus on how to advance in your academic careers in the context of building your professional reputation, and I understand that may not be something that you care as much about anymore. That said, all of you who are at that level, I'm sure that you mentor lots of people who are at the instructor, assistant, associate, professor level, and all of what I'm going to talk about today is all really important things as a mentor that you can help your mentees at sort of lower academic ranks look at early and sort of build upon their professional reputation. So I hope that there's something for everybody. Okay, so professional reputation, I keep throwing that word out, but what does this mean to you? So Jamie, what does it mean to you?
It's basically being recognized in the community for excellence in your position.
Okay, recognizing the community for excellence in your position. Okay, and John Fusiak, do you have a different take on what professional reputation means to you?
I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be excellence, I would hope.
You're right.
How people, your institution in general, region, like what they think of you when they hear your name.
Okay, so people in your, so I heard in your community, I heard in your institution, I heard in your region, and who else can I call? Dr. Harvey, what do you think about what is professional reputation to you?
Well, I guess I'd add national, involvement, so that you're recognized on a national level.
Okay, so national involvement and being recognized at a national level for what you do. Okay, so why is, and I'm not going to cold call anybody, why is building a professional reputation important in one's academic career? Why do we even care about this? Who said that? Jack, who said that? Oh, Ronnie. Promotion. Promotion. Tell me more about what you mean by that.
I mean, a lot of whether clinician educator career is dependent on you being part of the faculty track, assistant professor, associate professor, a lot of it depending on publications, but also being known nationally as part of like letters to be promoted from across the country. And then the workshops and other things that you do contribute to your repertoire to move up the board.
Okay, so promotion is the big thing, and that's actually most of what I'm going to be talking about today. Most of the time when people get jobs as clinician educators in an academic institution, the thought is that at some point over time, they will move up in the academic ranks. That's not necessarily what ends up happening, and maybe that's more important to some people than it is to others, but that's a big part of being in academic medicine, is trying to achieve the next step in academia. And a lot of the things that Ronnie mentioned go into promotion, one of which is national reputation, and a lot of the other things that we think about as far as scholarship and some of the other things that we do as clinician educators also lend themselves very well to building a professional reputation, so they're very intertwined. Any other thoughts about why professional reputation might be important? Yeah.
And maybe it's naive, but I think that when something happens to you,
So it's kind of like if you prove yourself, then you're more likely to have people either try to provide you opportunities to do more of what you want to do, or you may have, that may mean that people just sort of leave you to do what you want to do and stay off your back because they know that you're capable and that you can do it. Okay, Cal?
I think it makes it more fun. Like, you have these passions and things that you like to do, but a lot of times in your own institution, there's only like one other person that shares it. But when you get to be known for something you love to do, and you meet other people that love to do across the country, it just makes it.
Yeah, so professional reputation opens doors, right? It opens doors for you to get to know other people who have similar passions, and it provides opportunities for you to collaborate, even if that means beyond your own borders. Any other last thoughts about why professional reputation is important too?
Easier to publish. I think that's well too. And just
Tell me more
having
about that.
ideas. I just think of Dr. Alnicki and, just being so involved, I do move up the ranks of, journal organizations and reviewing, and people come to you, either in the mentorship position or whatnot.
Okay, so definitely, if you have a really good professional reputation, then you're going to be put in positions where people are going to come and want to consult with you more. It may put you in positions of leadership more easily. And then sort of the first thing that you said is it makes it more easy to publish. So one could make the argument that if you have a really good track record of being excellent in whatever it is that you're excellent in, then you may have less hurdles or barriers to overcome when you want to keep doing that. Not to say that Dr. Alnicki can, write up just a piece of garbage and that they'll accept it just because his name is on it, but there is something to be said that, if somebody has a really long track record of excellence, that actually, comes with some clout, I would say. And then there was another comment, yes?
It's a major driver for your clinical practice, and then also having a good personal reputation has benefits for the department and the institution. It increases its brand recognition.
Right. So it's good for you because if you have a good professional reputation in general, your patients may be more willing to refer patients to you, and that's really largely your clinical reputation, but your professional reputation working in an academic medical center also is important to patient care. And then also, if you have a good professional reputation, that gains a lot of points for your division, your department, potentially your institution. So it's not only good for you, but it's good for the people that you work with and for. Okay. All right, so lots of good reasons. I already alluded to this, that most of what I'm going to focus on today is how professional reputation relates to promotion, although I will say that lots of the things that clinician educators do and the opportunities that clinician educators can pursue in building their professional reputation has to do with scholarly work and those types of things, which is not entirely in the bucket of national reputation. It's more than that. So we'll talk mostly about promotion. Okay, so promotion for clinician educators. This is the only slide that I have on promotion specifically for clinician educators without mentioning reputation. So, and it's really a sad slide, to be honest. So there's a lot of data out there that tells us that compared to those academicians who pursue biomedical research careers or clinician investigation careers, those types of other careers, not clinician educator careers, generally we have a lower rank when you're controlling for everything else. Generally we have lower satisfaction with our advancement towards promotion. We're less familiar with promotion guidelines. we generally have less mentoring, and we have less resources and opportunities to develop our professional reputations as well as to develop our academic careers compared to people who are in other tracks, which is kind of sad. I don't know, these are not studies from our institution. I think that a lot of these things may not be entirely true for us, but in general, sort of across the board, clinician educators are already sort of at a disadvantage going in because of these factors. Okay, so we'll talk about reputation and promotion. So there is some data, not a lot, about what are the correct promotion guidelines for clinician educators. The reason why there's not a whole lot out there, and the two that I could find are from 1997 and 1993, are that really this seems to be pretty institution specific. That does not mean that across institutions that there's significant differences in what it means to be promoted for clinician educator tracks, but it really seems to be, most importantly, first and foremost, an institution specific thing. So we'll talk a little bit about PIT in a while, but there have been some guidelines, national guidelines, one that was published in JGIM and one that was published in Academic Medicine, that puts forth some general guidelines for promotion for clinician educators. And, you know, goes on to say that promotion and tenure remain the utmost recognition of scholarship, and generally promotion needs to satisfy two criteria. One is that the candidate must have excellence as judged by peers, and two, they have to have dissemination in the public domain. So that makes sense to us. Both of those things make sense. Now, when it comes to actually defining what each of those means, that's where it gets a little bit cloudy, and that's where it gets a little bit more institution specific. They do also go on to say the traditional criterion of national reputation may not be readily transferred to clinician educators for a couple reasons. First of all, most of the time, clinician educators are most highly valued in their home environments. That's where they're on the grounds teaching and developing curricula for their own programs. And so they're most generally famous in their own institutions. And a lot of times, pursuit of a national reputation may in turn detract from clinician educators' local responsibilities. Because remember, most clinician educators have a decent amount of clinical work to do. They have responsibilities to their programs. They have curricula that they're being asked to develop locally for their specific program or institution, and that takes a lot of time and energy, and it's part of their job description. So those types of things may then detract from one's ability to focus outside of their own institution and focus sort of on these elements of promoting themselves nationally. And the other thing that we know is that contributions that achieve national recognition are desirable, particularly for promotion to the full professor level. So even though this statement is here, meaning that most promotion committees care most about national reputation for people going from associate to professor level, this is still relevant to everybody because it takes a lot to get that national reputation, and you have to start early, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Okay, so this was a study that was done in 1997, and it was a study that looked at promotion criteria for clinician educators in the U.S. and Canada. They surveyed over 100 promotion committee chairpersons, and they asked these folks, here's this list of generally accepted criteria for promotion, and please rate them on a level of importance on a scale from 1 to 7. And I'm not sure how well this is projecting. Okay, so I think you can see. So as you can see, we have pretty much everything across the board being important, because neutral would be about 3.5. So all of these things are important, but some tend to fall out as more important than others. So teaching skills is the most important. So you need to be an excellent teacher if you're going to be promoted in the clinician educator track at your institution. Clinical skills also very important. Mentoring and role modeling is third, and then reputation is fourth. Now in their statistical analysis, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, you may see that there's tiny little letters, not sure there, tiny little superscript letters here. And basically, these letters mean that anything with a matching letter, actually, there's no statistical significant difference between those things. What that boils down to is that reputation, statistically, in this study, is at the same level of importance as clinical skills, mentoring and role modeling, coordinating clerkships and programs, and curriculum development. So it's up there with all the normal stuff that clinician educators would expect to have as part of their job responsibility. I would say that most of the things going into a job, or even once you're in a job as a clinician educator, you would know that you're a clinician educator, you need to be excellent at teaching, you need to be a good doctor, you're probably going to be asked to be a good role model, you're probably going to be asked to lead programs and develop curriculum. I'm not sure that I necessarily remember anybody telling me when I got my assistant professor job that I also need to be paying attention to my reputation, or I need to actively do things to make my reputation better. So I thought this was very interesting. This is another study. This actually, along the same vein, looked at promotion criteria for clinician educators. And what they did was looked at department chairs versus the program committee chairs. Now I'll say that the program committee chairs, this is basically the table that I just showed you before. They took the sort of 1990 whatever data and then did a similar or same survey of department chairs, and then just compared the ranks to see if there were major differences. In general, there weren't too many major differences. I think that one thing that I thought was interesting is the difference between personal qualities. Department chairs ranked personal qualities a lot higher than promotion committee chairs. Maybe that's because promotion committee chairs are actually just looking at a bunch of paper for somebody and they don't actually know the person necessarily. And then there's a pretty big difference between the importance of research in medical education, which actually comes through in a couple of the different studies. But I do want to point out sort of where reputation falls. And again, on a scale from 1 to 7, with 7 being the highest, it ranks pretty high. And so not only do promotion committee chairs think that reputation is important, but department chairs think it is important. And remember, it's your department chair that has to put you up for promotion. So if you can't convince your department chair that you have a great reputation and all these other things, then that also is going to impede your ability to even be put up for promotion. And then finally, they looked at clinician educators. So what they did was they surveyed against very similar question or same questions, but they looked at 107 clinician educators at the assistant professor level from 80 different U.S. academic medical centers. And then they asked them what they thought about these well-accepted criteria for promotion and asked them to rank. And they display the data a little bit differently here, but they again compare that to the promotion committee chair study from 1996-97. And you'll see that these clinician educators thought, probably wrongly, that clinical research was the most important thing to get promoted. I don't know if these people just don't have a clinician educator track at their institution, or if they just need a lot of help in understanding how the promotion process works. But you'll see that promotion committee chairs for clinician educators obviously think that clinical research is pretty unimportant. But again, I want to focus on reputation. So, you know, in general, both clinician educators at the assistant professor level as well as promotion committee chairs rank reputation pretty highly as something that needs to go into the equation when thinking about promotion. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about how reputation is assessed. So we have these general guidelines out there that were published in Academic Medicine and in JGIM, and every institution has their own policy and procedures for promotion and the types of criteria that candidates need to meet in order to get promoted. But I think that in general, assessing national reputation is a little bit difficult and sometimes nebulous. There was one study that I could find that actually, it was the same study that they asked promotions committee chairs about what they thought about the different criteria. That study also asked them, okay, for national reputation, which of these things do you use to actually assess national reputation? And of them, which is the most important, or of them, which are the most important? And so you'll see, when assessing reputation, these chairs basically rank national peer-reviewed awards as the highest. They also say that soliciting input from outside the institution about one's reputation is important. Regional and national offices or positions in academic societies, invited lectures. I'm assuming that that means outside of one's own institution, although they didn't specify. Soliciting input from within the institution, so these would be peer letters from within the institution, and then service on committees for professional organization. So these are the main things that program committee chairs use to assess a candidate's reputation. And I think this is really important to remember for everybody in the room, because if you're not, you don't have to necessarily, at your instructor or assistant level, you don't necessarily have to, have aced all these at this point or any of these at this point, but these are really important things to think about. If you had to focus your effort in one or two areas, think about some of these things and about how you would go about making sure that your promotions committee, when it comes time, would be able to assess you in these areas. I pulled this from a study in academic medicine that was pretty recent. It was published last year, and it was the title of the paper was Perceptions of Division Directors in General Internal Medicine about the importance of and support for scholarly work done by clinician educators. And they basically are looking at specifically importance for promotion to rank of associate professor here. And you'll see there's lots and lots and lots of things that we do as clinician educators that are valued by in the promotion process. But what I did, I just drew this line here that cuts it off as at least a third had to be ranked most or very important. So I just drew the line where at least a third ranked these things as most or very important. And then I put stars, and they're huge, so that maybe doesn't come across as well. But you would see that the majority of things actually, one could make a case that those things are actually either related to professional reputation, or by doing these things, you can promote your professional reputation. A lot of things have to do with outside of one's own program or outside of one's own institution. So publishing peer-reviewed articles, leading workshops at national meetings, publishing curricula, presenting at national meetings, writing review articles, doing regional presentations, and doing lectures at a different institution. So all of the most important things that clinician educators can do to be promoted to associate are pretty much things that are outside of one's own institution. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about PIT. So I scoured the guidelines, and they're pretty extensive, and if you are in any kind of faculty position here, particularly if you are anything other than full professor, you probably should familiarize yourself with these guidelines so that you just know what goes into it. And I think that I didn't really even look at these guidelines until I was already in the promotions process, because I was curious, but I wish I would have looked at them earlier. I did not obviously put everything up here, but I pulled out the things that I thought were most relevant to reputation. So in order to be promoted to associate professor from assistant professor level, there has to be attainment of eminence in a scholarly or professional field. And how that's judged or determined is authorship of important reviews, chapters, or books, being recognized by peers regionally as evidenced by letters, and I'm going to get back to that one, and then membership in leading scientific organizations. What we have here in italic is explicit reference to reputation in chair and referee letters. I got that from our Associate Dean of Faculty Affairs, Dr. Hofkosh, in the audience, because I reached out to her and I said, hey, when you're in the room and you guys are talking, how do you really try and figure out what a candidate's reputation is or whether it meets criteria? And she agreed that it's kind of like there's a gestalt, which is what we think we're all feeling, and lots goes into deciding whether a candidate is ready for promotion. But she said one thing that's really, really helpful is if your chair and referee letters actually explicitly talk about what your reputation is, locally, regionally, nationally. Now, we don't have necessarily jurisdiction over telling our referees what to put in their letters, or our chairs for that matter. But when you're asking people to write letters for you, you oftentimes can say, would you please consider, if you feel like it's appropriate, would you please consider talking a little bit about what you think my professional reputation is like, as evidenced by, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did. So you might want to highlight certain things that you've done that would allow them to provide support in their letter for this. That doesn't mean that if they kind of don't mention it at all, that the committee can't figure it out other ways, but this seems to be something that's very important and probably something that you can easily do when you're asking people to write letters for you. Okay, and then from the professor level, so from associate to professor level, attainment of authoritative knowledge and reputation in a recognized field of learning and the achievement of effective teaching skills. So lots more things go into this. So I'm kind of feeling like at Pitt, to be promoted from associate to professor, it's probably a lot more important to have a professional reputation that reaches beyond the boundaries of Pitt, because there's a lot more things here that are listed as important from going from the associate to professor level. Recognized by peers nationally and internationally, again, as evidenced by letters. Leadership role in significant scientific organizations, contributions to books and teaching materials, invited lectureships, leadership in the development and presentation of continuing medical education, being an invited panelist, and having received teaching awards. Okay. So how can we develop our own professional reputation? So I gave you lots of information about what professional reputation is and why it's important and what other people think it is, and some evidence about what constitutes professional reputation. But really, the main person who is in charge of one's professional reputation is yourself. And so this is something that I hope by the end of the talk you'll realize that you actually have to actively work towards and do stuff in order to make it happen. So let's talk about that. We're going to do an activity. We're going to talk. I want you to pair off and talk to your neighbor, and I want you to tell your neighbor what you think your own local, regional, and national reputation is right now. And I want you to tell your neighbor also one thing that you have done already to help build your professional reputation. And you'll see that there's places on your worksheet to write these things down, and then we're going to come back together as a group, and I'm going to ask each pair to share one or two things that they have done to build their own professional reputation thus far. We're going to have about 5 to 7 minutes for this activity.
And of course, you don't have a pen.
I'm on
So locally, it's really recognition. I think locally, I'm already known as this weird person in the case of my department. Because I do a combination of both different hashtags. I think a lot of these words are used to volunteer me. I think the researching people want me to stay in research, and the education people want me to do education. So I think it's tough trying to figure out academically where my niche is. So I spend a lot of time trying to bridge both groups to make everybody happy. So that I think part of it is just with topics that I'm so what I've done is by sort of nurture both of those things, just sort of making culture happy, like continuing in my clinical side of my research, while trying to become active in our educational side, trying to be part of like trying to do various yeah, recently was one of the like example of production of abstracts and papers. The education people like they're not so it's I spent a lot of time just sort of like thinking back to the research people and being direction I'm going to move to research, especially the last 3 years. It was less like I know what your education stuff, I know what your research stuff, but more than I know what my education is. So that's what everybody knows that's the long-term plan, but we all have been thinking about the long-term like projects and goals on. It's just doing all the foundation and then get there. What about research? It's weird because it's like an odd rate. Are we talking Midwest? Are we talking like in this part of Pennsylvania, like outside, you know, like in the tri-state area, Pennsylvania, I don't think I'm doing anything like outside of
So nobody.
it's hard. It's like if you're in a larger area, there's like 20 places. You know, like you're here. It's not like with the presentation, it's like here, and like ADHD.
Yeah, well, it's hard about I definitely think there's
I don't really have anything. So nationally, I'm training in Chicago, and also known in Chicago. I'm training in Baptist Chicago. They've actually invited me to speak my training in medicine. And so most people have, because Chicago is the Chicago, they have a so they invited me back to be part of a panel on critical care and speak anywhere like this. I wasn't. I mean, it feels weird because I know everybody there. So it's like I'm involved like nationally, but still not here.
Okay, I'd like to try to wrap up now so that we can keep moving forward in the talk. So if you could get your final thoughts down. All right, so I'm not going to ask you guys to share with the group what you think your professional reputation is, but what I am going to ask is to provide some examples of what individuals in the room have done already to help promote their professional reputation. So why don't we maybe start in the back here with the more senior people, because those would be very good examples.
One of the things we talked about is to get involved in societies, because one of the hard things for junior people is to get people outside their institution to speak up for them. And that's a relatively easy way to do it. And it's a nice way to get a good reputation. We're talking about some people we know who you say their name, this is somebody that will deliver, there won't be any drama, they'll do what they say, and it's a nice way to have other people. And then those people who know you when you're all junior, they're going to rise in the ranks too. So when it comes time, you can break each other's promotion.
And so what specific organization or committee did you get involved in that you felt had a major impact on your professional reputation?
So I'll take that one.
Okay.
So the Educational Executive Committee of the American Society of Nephrology is made up of program directors. So first thing I did was take the responsibility of, saying, yeah, sure, I will crazily become an associate program director. And then to prove that I'm really insane, I'll become a program director. And then from that, you self-nominate. You can actually self-nominate to serve on the executive committee. And then you're elected by folks. And once you get into that, and you get to know the 153 program directors of the ASN, all of a sudden, you're going to meetings, you're presenting, and people know you through your executive committee responsibility. You have to step up, or you have to have a mentor that
puts you
forward.
Yeah, so what that's a nice example of is that you had a local leadership position, and instead of just saying, okay, I'm happy with my local leadership position, you also thought, okay, how can I leverage my local leadership position into something that is going to get me more mileage in the national realm? Okay, other things in that area? Yes?
So I thought I could share something for people who haven't been in this institution and come from a different institution, and the barriers you face and how you could in a smaller institution. I think that's one thing. It's the one thing that I can say is you have a lot of peer support here. You have a lot of opportunities, and when you come from an institution where you have a passion, and as Raquel said, the passion. And so for me, one of the things that I realized that I did not have a whole lot of support, and I did not have people who were thinking like me. And I reached out to the society, just like Mike said, at SIGM. And when I was the medical director of the clinic, we met with the other medical directors when we didn't have all these subcommittees in SIGM, and we created that, and we used to have interest groups. And then we developed this mission. We all learned from each other, and that allowed me to get to that. So people who go to a smaller place, you need that. You need that person. You may not have a mentor, but you find somebody who's either in the same. We realize we're all in the same position. People in North Carolina, people in Michigan, people in that, and we realize, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. So then it didn't feel like we were isolated, and then that helped, develop some kind of, I would say maybe projects that we did together, and then from there moved on to maybe other areas of your interest, and you can find people through them.
Okay, great. Yes, and that's it.
AAMC is a good organization. The group of student here involved in I think that's a wonderful way to become involved and get to know. So we have a group, the other student affairs team over the years. I think I've written 4 or 5 letters in some areas, and I think that's a good organization.
So again, a theme is sort of taking what you're doing locally in your leadership position, finding a national organization that has other people like you that have already banded together, and putting yourself forward to be involved in those things so that you can meet other people. Anything from the front of the room that you guys want to share that you've done to promote your professional reputation?
I think a lot of us have presented at workshops at national conferences.
Okay. So taking the initiative to write an abstract for a workshop and putting that forward, and if it gets accepted, then all of a sudden you're teaching it in a national venue, which is a great first step. Okay, how about back here? Anything that you want to share with the group that you've done?
Well, I think one thing that Adam mentioned is if we're involved in curriculum developments, publishing that is important. Perhaps working with another institution to use your curriculum is also a means to facilitate promotions.
Right, so 2 things. Number 1 is if you've done a great project here locally, then make sure you put the pen to the paper and get it published. And that's a way for your work to be on the national scene. And then it's maybe even better if you can get another institution to use what you've done, because now it's benefited your institution, it's benefited another institution, and you can say to the world, hey, my stuff is so great that other people outside of my institution want to use it too. You had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, a lot of professional societies, it kind of works both ways. I mean, we've been talking about it as if we're trying to seek things, but there are all these programs that exist in most societies looking for young investigators, clinician educators, or scientists, or put them in positions to succeed, and those programs can be applied for For me, as a gastroenterologist, there was the American Gastroenterological Association, AGA, Future Leaders Program, something that they had just inaugurated. It's a program. There's 16 national people. I got one of those slots, and it just basically is a platform where you promote it, essentially. It was like a one-page application. It's not difficult.
Yeah.
And, I just think that there are opportunities that really you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. So a lot of times, just looking at your sort of national society website, you'll see that there is a call for applications or volunteers to a task force or a committee that really is relatively low-hanging fruit when you go in to see what's involved, but actually can have great yield on the other end. Other things here in the middle that you want to point out? Yes.
I think it's easy to get lost on the national stage when there's so many people there. I think there's great value in hosting your own meetings in your community that have a national draw.
Yeah.
Because that really builds your recognition nationally and creates new opportunities for you.
Did you organize anything in particular that?
I'm a surgeon, so I do that regularly.
Okay.
And that's been a big part of building my national and international.
Is hosting an excellent local session and getting people from outside of our own institution to come to it. Okay, and then anything from the front part that you want to point out that you've done?
Yeah, I think we talked too about the beginning on because some of this is overwhelming.
Yeah.
We see workshops and meetings. We talked about just showing up. So going to the national meetings, regional meetings, and doing things like maybe joining the interest group. So you don't have to be an expert in anything to join an interest group.
Right.
And then even from an older level, what I was thinking about is those powerhouses in research often go to those interest groups because they still have a passion for it, and their reputation starts to be built on who they mentor. So as you get older, your mentee successes then lead your professional reputation. And so they find mentees by going to the interest groups. I think that helped me a lot to get into an area of research that it accelerated beyond what I could because I didn't have any mentors in my local institution doing my area of research.
So what I'm hearing is go to your national meetings, show up, meet people, network, and maybe even try to find a mentor outside your own institution that you can work with. So that can also help. Okay, so lots of great things. You've pointed out probably all the things that I'm going to talk a little bit more about that you can do. Okay, so the first thing, and again, this is not really applicable to many people in the audience, but mostly like the people up here, it is applicable to. The first thing that you can do when you have your professional reputation in mind is think about your professional reputation when you're selecting a job, selecting where you're going to train or where you're going to take your first faculty position. And make sure that the place that you're going to has opportunities for you to develop a professional reputation. Because if you go to a place that you are not going to leave from if you're in training with a better reputation than when you came in, or that doesn't foster the development of a professional reputation, then you're going to have a hard time moving up the ranks in academia. So things that you can think about when looking for a job. Or interviewing at a job. So have program faculty attained strong national reputations? Who are these program faculty? What do you know about them? And how prominent are they at the national level? Is there mentorship available to you? What is the track record of placing trainees and faculty into competitive positions? So if you go to a place where, maybe recently many of the more mid-level or senior faculty have gone on to other institutions and taken fantastic jobs, then that obviously means that place is a place that you can develop your own professional reputation. To what degree do junior and mid-level faculty participate actively in national organizations? So when you guys are, at least in my division, like everybody goes to SGIM and it's kind of a given, but if you're going to get a new job, ask them, do your faculty go to the national meeting? Do they go to SGIM or whatever other national meeting? And is their time allowed for people to go? Is it encouraged? That sort of thing. And then how does the program support faculty development? Are there opportunities for faculty development, or is it mainly, is the onus mainly on you? Another really important thing to do early on is make sure that you pay attention to your local reputation, because you can't really attain a regional or national reputation until you have a solid local reputation. Make sure that you're a reliable and trustworthy person. Make sure that you're known as a team player. Always strive towards excellence in everything that you do, including in your clinical care, because as a clinician educator, it's really important that you're a good doctor too. Say yes to opportunities. presented to you, especially when they're presented to you by your mentor, your division chief, or your department chair, and follow through. I'm not going to talk a lot about like when to say yes, when to say no. We've had talks in this venue plenty of times before about how to negotiate that. I'm not suggesting that every single thing somebody asks you to do as a junior faculty you should say yes to, but if it comes from one of these three people, it's probably a good idea to think strong and hard as to why you might even think to say no. And that has to be there has to be a really good reason if you're going to say no, and most of the time you should say yes. And then volunteer to serve on committees at your own local institution, whether that be in your division, in your department, at the medical school, at the UPMC corporate level. Look for opportunities to become involved locally. Another really important thing developing a professional reputation is to find a niche. Ideally, a niche fulfills lots of things. It fulfills your personal interests and passions, and it allows you to achieve recognition and also contribute to your institution, your specialty, or community. So if you have a niche that's your passion and you're super excited about it, but like literally nobody else is excited about it, and you're not going to get support and you're not going to go very far with that. So finding a niche that you both feel passionate about, but also is desirable by your local institution or desirable in your specialty is really important. And then start to craft the things that you do and that you say yes to fall in line with that niche. I'm not on the promotions committee, but I think that it's really important when the promotions committee looks at your body of work to be able to see a main theme and make sure that everything that you're doing, or most of the stuff that you're doing, actually all marries together well and makes sense and sort of looks as if you were trying to pursue valuable work in a given area. So things that you can do as far as niche development, they can be in any kind of category you can think of. They can be in the curriculum development or teaching category. It can be a specific clinical content area that you want to work towards becoming an expert in, like women's health or pain management or whatever. It can be skill-specific competencies that you become an expert in, communication skills, simulation work, and then it could be also at the administrative or leadership role. So you could really work towards gaining a significant leadership role in your own institution that you can then leverage at a national level like we've talked about before. And then engage in relevant professional development around that niche area. So sometimes if it's a topic that there aren't a lot of people at your own institution that are well versed in, or that there's not a lot of support for, then seek out national opportunities for additional training and faculty development that you can participate in outside of your own institution. I'm going to, just for the interest of time, not necessarily make you do an activity on the niche, but I want you to really think about what is your niche, and if you don't have a niche that you can write down right now, then I want you to start thinking about that being an important next step in your career development. You need to be able to tell people what your one or two niches are, and if you don't really have a sense of what that is just yet, that's okay, especially if you're early, but think about it and make sure that you start to say yes to opportunities that fall in line with that niche. And then think about one thing that you can do in the next year to add to your repertoire within that area of niche, whether that be a specific professional development opportunity that you can take part in, a committee that you can join, collaborating with an expert in that field, or other things that you can think of. And then I want you to write those down. Another really important aspect is finding the right mentor. I can't stress to you enough how important mentorship is in helping to build your professional reputation. They can give you advice about when to say yes and when and how to say no. They can introduce you to other mentors, to collaborators, to leaders in your field. They can find you teaching and or committee opportunities either locally or beyond. They can invite you to collaborate on local, regional, or national projects such as article reviews, editorials, presentations, and they can nominate you for awards or scholarships. So I'm just going to take a moment out to talk a little bit about my experience with mentorship. I have two main mentors here, and I can say that they've pretty much done every single thing on this list for me. Sometimes that means that as you as the mentee, you need to kind of put this stuff on their radar, and you need to make sure that they understand that that's important to you. But I have had lots of opportunities to do some of these things at really the mercy of my mentors. Early on, I was asked to co-author an editorial. So my mentor was asked to write an editorial, and he was really busy, and he said, hey, Carla, do you want to do this? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but sure. And I did it, and I did an awful job, and he like totally fixed it. But this was like in my first year of faculty. But I actually got, you know, this editorial published that had been then cited lots of times since then. I've had opportunities to present on the coattails of my other mentor, who is always invited to do these big national presentations, and it's easier for her to have a co-presenter because then she has half the work that she needs to do, right? So it's beneficial to her, but then that puts me on the national stage, and so on and so forth. Some questions that you can ask your mentor when you're meeting with them about professional reputation development. What do I need to do here to succeed? What's most likely to derail me from developing a national reputation? How do I ensure time to write, do research, or teach? Who do I need to get to know here, locally, regionally, nationally, and can you help me meet them? One thing to do is when you go to a national meeting, kind of tag along with your mentor, somebody who's kind of older than you or been around the block longer than you, because you'll get to meet a lot of people that way that you wouldn't normally have met otherwise. Ask them what organizations that you should join. You should ask them what awards or scholarships are available for me. So I saw a call for national awards probably like 3 or 4 years ago through SGIM, and I was looking at the criteria, and I was like, well, I think I might possibly be competitive for this. And so I asked my mentors, do you think that I could be competitive for this? Do you think that this might at all apply to me? And they're like, oh yes, it definitely will. We'll go ahead and nominate you. And you know, I had to like get nominated 3 years in a row before I actually won the award. But hey, I won the award, but I never would have even gotten that award if I hadn't been on the lookout and then asked my mentors to support me in that award. And then ask them explicitly, will you think of me when an opportunity to review or write comes along or present comes along? So, you know, they get asked to do a ton of things, and they're probably saying no to like half of them because they don't have the time. But if you put yourself on the radar as somebody who might be able to help them or do it for them or in conjunction with them, then that will get you additional opportunities. Okay, right now take the next minute to write down 1 or 2 things that you're going to ask your mentor to help you with or do to enhance your professional reputation in the next month that you're going to meet with them. And for the mentors in the room who don't necessarily plan on asking a mentor to do something for them, for the mentors in the room, think of one thing for one mentee that you have that you're going to do to help enhance their professional reputation. Okay. Next topic is networking. So networking, also known as initiating, sustaining, and nurturing connections with others. It enables you to meet potential future collaborators, mentors, and letter writers. It's so important, and it's probably the thing that I was the worst at the beginning. And that's just kind of my personality, that when I would go outside of my own institution, I would kind of just feel like just a number in the sea and not important, and I really didn't put myself out there to try and meet other people. I really had to force myself to do this. And I think that it really then was a little bit more challenging for me when it did come time for me to come up with a list of 12 people to submit to the promotions committee that might be able to write a letter on my behalf, because I felt like I hadn't done enough groundwork in that area when I was going from assistant to associate. So one thing, if I can impress upon you the most, especially as junior people in the room, is network, even if it feels uncomfortable or outside your comfort zone. A broad network is significantly associated with promotion. There's studies to support this. It requires active participation in local and national conferences and organizations. And some easy ways to do this is a lot of times national meetings have one-on-one mentoring opportunities that you can sign up for. And you can sign up for this either as a mentee or as a mentor. So yes, when you're trying to build a professional reputation, we think about meeting people and knowing people who are above us, but it's also really helpful for more senior people in the room to sign up to be a mentor for people who are younger, because you never know when that person, whether that person may be a potential collaborator or may know somebody that they can introduce you to. So taking advantage of these one-on-one mentoring sessions. Another thing is a lot of times we have visiting professors that come for various reasons. And if your chair or if your division chief or your chair offers you the opportunity to have a one-on-one meeting with them or a sit-down, even if you think you have nothing in common with that person, it's really valuable to take advantage of people with great national reputations here in your own institution visiting you that you can sit down, even if it's just for 15, 20 minutes with. Really, I'm not going to cover the elevator speech in detail, but the elevator speech essentially is 1 or 2 sentences that summarize who you are professionally. It really shouldn't be more than 20 seconds, and you should have this in your back pocket and ready to spill out of your mouth at any given moment. In particular, when you're at national meetings, you should have this. The worst thing you can do is if you run into somebody that you might have met before or whatever, and they say, "Oh, Carla, how are you doing? How have you been?" And you say, "Oh, I've been doing well. How about you?" That was like a huge missed opportunity. So having an elevator speech is really important. It's not something that we oftentimes are familiar with, but it's something to spend a little bit more time thinking about. Make sure that what you say about yourself leaves the other person with enough information to ask you more questions about what you're doing or about what you've been doing. And make sure also that you have kind of 2 versions, one for people that you're meeting brand new, like say you're at a new interest group and nobody in the room knows you. Have your little spiel about who you are for people that don't know you, and then have a separate spiel for people that you may see on a yearly basis that can update them with all the new and exciting things that you've been involved with over the course of the last year. My elevator speech generally, and this is like the one for meeting new people, I direct the Academic Clinician Educator Scholars Fellowship in General Internal Medicine and the Master's and Certificate programs in Medical Education at the University of Pittsburgh, and my main scholarly areas of interest include patient-doctor communication, professional academic development, and the patient experience. And so that way, if any of those things strike a chord with any of the people in the room, then they have the opportunity to say, "Hey, can you tell me more about what that master's program is like?" Or, "I'm really into the patient experience too. What are you guys doing at your local institution?" Okay, so we don't have time to do the whole elevator speech right now, but I really do want to task you with writing down and making sure that you're prepared with an elevator speech before you go to your next local, national, or regional meeting or committee. Other things that you can do on networking, so when you're at conferences, whether locally or nationally, make sure that you seek out experts, people that you don't know in person, but you've read their work. Tell them that you're familiar with their work and tell them what you're doing. If you have heard a poster or oral presentation that you are particularly interested in, don't just kind of listen in the audience and then walk out the room at the end. Go up to that person and say, "Hey, I thought that was really interesting," or "I'm doing something similar." Also, if you're the one presenting, and let's say you're doing an oral presentation, and there are some people in the room that seem particularly interested, as evidenced by asking questions or making comments, seek them out at the end of your oral presentation and say, "Hey, I noticed that you were really interested in my talk. Does it relate to anything that you're doing at your own institution?" And then offer to give a talk as a visiting speaker. A lot of times this is easiest to do through your mentor because they're the ones who tend to get asked. But if you're talking to a group of people at a national meeting and you say, "I have a specific area of interest or expertise in blank area, I'm available to come talk to your folks if you'd like that." That might seem uncomfortable, but hey, that's how you can get your name out there and get invited to places. And then finally, and not to make this sort of secondary, I think educational scholarship is hugely important. It's hugely important in developing your career, whether it's locally or nationally. It's definitely important to building professional reputation. But as clinician educators, we oftentimes have a hard time finding time in our schedules to do this part because we are busy with patients and we are busy with our own responsibilities. So make sure that you set time aside to pursue educational scholarship. Try to take your current situation, your current job responsibilities, and turn them into scholarship whenever you can. And try to seek internal or local funding to take that to the next level so that not only are you building a curriculum, but you also have some resources to evaluate it. And then that leaves yourself to the ability to disseminate. And you can disseminate in lots of ways. It doesn't just have to be peer-reviewed publications. It can be any of the ways listed on this slide. But think about these things not only as ways to propagate your own interests, passions, and work, but also as ways to develop your professional reputation. And then finally, I'm not going to talk a lot about this either because we're out of time, but an educational portfolio is not required here, but it may be soon and for promotion. And I think that's sort of what's coming next. And Dina's shaking her head yes, and Jamie's shaking his head yes. The easiest thing that you guys can do for yourself is just start compiling this stuff now. Start early. You don't want to have to wait until your crunch time for getting your portfolio together before promotion. Every bit of teaching and scholarly work that you do, file it somewhere so that it's all in one place, so that at some point you can say, here is a presentation of who I am professionally. Here is examples of my best work. So key points that I want for you to take home. Professional reputation is important in academic advancement in a career as an educator. Reputation building really starts locally and early. Strategy and effort is needed to develop your professional reputation beyond your local institution. It's generally not going to happen in a passive way for you. And keys to success include utilizing mentors, networking, developing a niche, and disseminating your scholarly work. And then finally, an educator portfolio is a great place to portray evidence of your professional reputation. So I know that we're over. I apologize for that. I started a few minutes late. Any last comments or questions for me? Yes.
The first thing I would like to say is I wish you would have given me this lecture 30 years ago.
Yeah, I know. I wish somebody would have given it to me.
And then I want to emphasize a couple things. First of all, protected time is absolutely a must. One of the things that they do to young faculty is they get too much clinical time. If you go into a position and they tell you you're going to have 5 half days of clinical week and 7 months of rounding, you're not going to be able to meet your goal of being a clinician educator or anything else, other than being a really great clinician. The second thing is that reputation is really good. The reputation and going to work in a supportive or a non-supportive malignant environment will destroy your spirit. I know that from experience. Not here. At another institution. And then finally, one of the things that we see when we do promotions and admissions to the Academy of Medical Master Educators is the lack of evaluation of teaching activities. That is your bread and butter. You really need to have all of your teaching activities evaluated and save that period, because that is the proof of your teaching skill, is what evaluations you do after that. So that is absolutely critical. And again, I wish you would have given me this talk 30 years ago. This is absolutely great.
Other comments or questions?
I guess I could just follow up on something that Jim said, and that is, I think the issue of protected time is very department and institution specific. And what actually I would suggest you think about is how to get done what you need to get done with whatever time you have. Because there are lots of places where you go, departments that you're working in that where, in pediatrics, for example, term protected time is not. You just have to figure out, and it requires a lot of mentoring to get done what you need to get done in the time.
Dr. Hopkosh taught me the principle of what is unscheduled time, about saving an afternoon a week where you had nothing scheduled, and I'm sure your protected time gets violated as much as mine does.
I just have to protect myself from myself.
Yeah.
One of the last things is that the educator's portfolio is something that there are wonderful examples from Deborah Simpson at Medical College of Wisconsin. They're online, and they are wonderful in clarifying your educational mission, your elevator talk, and really being a supportive thing for your promotion.
Don't work too much on it because we're developing one for here that will be out in the next several months. So
for those of you who are on the brink of leaving us and going and getting jobs elsewhere. If your institution that you're going to doesn't have any specific guidelines, just look at what's available and make up your own. It's super important because you'll be asked to share at a promotion. You'll be asked to share if you ever get nominated for a national award. You need to have that ready. Like, there's just so many benefits to having it at your fingertips, and it just takes so much work to get it together if you don't start early. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.